Claire Moody, Labour MEP for the South West. When it comes to these workers in Swindon, what do you make of the situation? You've been meeting with them today.
Yeah, and I'm really glad that they came over today to put their case and to explain the circumstances they're facing in Swindon right now. It's horrifying. It is frankly horrifying. The point of having an agency workers directive is to provide protection for people in the workplace. And the employer, through various mechanisms, twists and turns, is escaping the purpose of the legislation. So hearing what's going on and then being able to follow through on that is really important for me as an elected representative.
So what's your interpretation? Who's to blame? Is Europe, as you mentioned there, it was a European directive that set the ball in motion. So is there a problem with European law at a European level, or is this something that goes back to the way the UK is interpreting the law?
This is about the way the UK has implemented the directive. The directive was very clear, and it's interesting because part of the problem with this is called the Swedish derogation. But as rightly was pointed out in the meeting just now and has been part of discussions all the way along, in Sweden, agency workers are treated very, very differently. So, this isn't, sort of comparing this to the Swedish situation. This is saying that the way the UK government in 2011 implemented the directive was an abuse of the intent of the directive, and it left this massive loophole that the Labour Party has said if we come back into government after the elections in May, we will close that loophole and ensure these agency workers get the protection they should be entitled to as of right.
The workers and the union are raising this as an issue out here in Europe. Is that because you're hoping that European pressure might right this wrong, if I can put it like that, that if it is all about an interpretation of European law, which was meant to be about fairness, that something's gone terribly wrong somewhere along the line?
Absolutely. And yes, this is part actually of a kind of wider process. The TUC have made a formal complaint to the European Commission about the UK's implementation of the directive, and that actually, because there is this enormous hole that you could drive a coach and horses through, the UK is actually in breach of not just kind of the purpose, but also the letter of the law. And we want very much for the Commission to hurry up with that process and come back with a very clear ruling that says actually the way the directive has been implemented is not sufficient. And that means that the people who we've been talking to today can have the protection that they so desperately need in law.
Turning to the way this warehouse is run and the companies involved, because there's many different companies involved. There's an employment agency, there's another company that's slightly involved with them, it seems, as DHL that run the warehouse, and then of course it's M&S products going through the warehouse, ending up in M&S shops. Does Marks and Spencer, in your view, have something to answer here as well?
I think this is a very important question. I mean, in this instance, it's about M&S. Actually, you get it frequently with all sorts of other brands as well. I hope M&S will be looking very closely at this individual case, because yes, it must have an impact on their brand that companies they are dealing with are willing to treat their workforce in this way. And there's a structural economic problem about this, but actually there's a very real problem that M&S has this brand that they like to build, and they do now have to sort of seriously look at their supply chain, and actually that opaque structure that you referred to as to who is where in that supply chain as well. But the reality is at the end of that are the people who do not know what hours they're going to work one day to the next. The reality is the different pay that people are getting, and the fact that they're on an agency, they're working for an agency for years. 8, 9, 10 years we were hearing about.
Just very briefly to finish, what would you like the EU to do? You mentioned that there's an investigation, if we can call it that, from the European Commission. What do you want Europe to do that could change this kind of situation in Swindon and perhaps elsewhere?
And this is, it's a formal complaint that's been put to the Commission. It was over a year ago. The timescale now has to be that they have to respond. They should have responded by now. Again, that was part of what we were saying in the meeting just now. They've got to get on with this. There are real lives at the end of this kind of process point, and we have to have that response back from the Commission saying, right, the UK must change its ways and must ensure that people get the rights that they're entitled to.